In the heart of Madrid stands one of Europe's most magnificent palaces, and perhaps its most tormented. Behind these gilded walls, where Spanish royalty once ruled an empire that spanned continents, something refuses to rest. Palace guards whisper of footsteps echoing through empty corridors at 3 a.m. Tour guides report visitors fleeing in terror from rooms that should be vacant. And in the shadows of the throne room, witnesses claim to see a figure that history remembers as Spain's most despised monarch. Ferdinand VII, el Rey Felón, the Felon King, a ruler so cruel, so treacherous, that his own people celebrated his death. Yet 2 centuries later, something bearing his likeness still stalks these royal halls. Why does Spain's most hated king refuse to leave the palace where he once wielded absolute power? What keeps his spirit chained to these marble floors and golden chambers? Tonight, we uncover the truth behind one of Europe's most terrifying royal hauntings. The empty throne still creaks at midnight. The corridors echo with phantom footsteps. And deep in the royal chambers, visitors report hearing a voice that refuses to accept that its reign of terror has ended. This is the story of a king who was so consumed by power that not even death could force him to abdicate. This is the haunting of Ferdinand VII. To understand why Ferdinand VII's ghost torments Madrid's royal palace, we must first explore the man whose cruelty earned him a place among history's most reviled monarchs. Born in 1784 into the powerful Bourbon dynasty, Ferdinand was the son of Charles IV and Maria Luisa of Parma. From childhood, he was groomed to inherit one of the world's greatest empires. But the young prince harbored a darkness that would eventually consume both his reign and his soul. Ferdinand's path to the throne was paved with betrayal. During the chaos of the Napoleonic Wars, he conspired against his own father, briefly seizing power in 1808 before being dethroned by Napoleon and imprisoned in France for 6 years. When he finally returned to Spain in 1814, something had twisted inside him. The restored king immediately revealed his true nature. With a stroke of his pen, he abolished the liberal constitution of 1812, Spain's first step toward democracy. What followed was a reign of terror that would earn him the infamous title El Rey Felón, the Felon King. Ferdinand unleashed the Inquisition upon his own people. Liberal thinkers were imprisoned, tortured, or forced into exile. The press was censored, universities were shuttered. Anyone who dared speak of freedom found themselves facing the king's brutal justice. His paranoia knew no bounds. He trusted no one, suspected everyone, and ruled through fear alone. Under his iron fist, Spain's vast American empire crumbled. One by one, the colonies declared independence: Mexico, Argentina, Chile, Peru, Colombia. The treasury bled dry as rebellion after rebellion stripped away centuries of Spanish dominance. Yet Ferdinand clung to absolute power with bloody determination, refusing to acknowledge that his tyranny was destroying the very kingdom he claimed to protect. Even in death, his cruelty continued. Through the Pragmatic Sanction, Ferdinand ensured his infant daughter Isabella II would inherit the throne, deliberately igniting the catastrophic Carlist Wars that would tear Spain apart for decades. Brother fought brother, father fought son, all because of one king's final act of spite. When Ferdinand VII finally died in 1833, church bells rang not in mourning, but in celebration. Spanish citizens danced in the streets. Wine flowed freely as people toasted the end of tyranny. The despot was dead, and Spain could finally breathe. But in the royal palace of Madrid, something suggests that Ferdinand VII never truly left his throne. His reign of terror may have ended, but his presence in those grand halls may be eternal. The king who refused to relinquish power in life appears unable to accept defeat in death. It was March 15, 2019, when night security guard Miguel Santos encountered something that would change his life forever. Miguel had worked the palace halls for 12 years, knew every sound, every shadow, every creak of the ancient building. But that night was different. "I was making my rounds past the throne room when I heard footsteps behind me," Miguel recalls in Spanish, his weathered face still showing traces of fear years later. "Heavy boots on marble. I turned around, nothing. But then I saw him." Miguel describes a tall, thin man in royal dress standing by the throne. The figure had an unmistakable air of authority, but also something darker, an anger that seemed to radiate from his very being. "He stared right through me, like I was nothing," Miguel remembers. His eyes, they were filled with such rage, such possessiveness. Then he just vanished. Miguel's experience isn't isolated. Palace records document over 40 similar encounters in the past decade alone. Tour guide Maria Fernandez has worked at the palace for 15 years and has her own chilling accounts. "The doors in the royal chambers slam shut by themselves," she explains. "Always at night, always the same rooms. Ferdinand's private study, his bedroom, the small chamber where he held his secret meetings. Cleaning staff member Carlos Ruiz has heard the phantom footsteps countless times. I've heard steps above me when I know the upper floors are empty. Heavy, angry steps, pacing back and forth like someone deep in thought or plotting something terrible. The hotspots are always the same. The throne room where Ferdinand held court and passed his cruel judgments, the royal chambers where he plotted against his enemies and signed death warrants, and the long corridor leading to his private study, the room where he signed Spain's most oppressive laws and planned the persecution of liberals. Visitors consistently report an overwhelming sense of being watched in these areas, as if invisible eyes are evaluating their every move and finding them wanting. But Ferdinand's presence isn't limited to shadowy appearances. Those who encounter his spirit report something far more chilling: his voice speaking from beyond the grave. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a paranormal researcher from the University of Madrid, led a comprehensive investigation in 2021. "Our team captured multiple EVPs during a 3-night study," she explains. "The voice was always the same, deep, authoritative, speaking in 19th century Castilian Spanish with the accent of Spanish nobility. The recordings are bone-chilling. A deep, whispered voice repeats the same phrase: 'Yo soy el rey. Yo soy el rey. I am the king. I am the king.' The words carry an unmistakable tone of defiance, as if Ferdinand's spirit refuses to accept that his absolute monarchy ever ended." British tourist Sarah Henderson experienced the voice firsthand during a 2022 visit. "We were in the Hall of Mirrors when the temperature dropped drastically, maybe 20 degrees in seconds," she recalls. "Then this voice, right behind my ear, whispered something in Spanish. I don't speak the language, but it sounded angry, possessive, like someone claiming ownership of the entire palace." Her husband, who had studied Spanish in university, turned pale when he heard the words. "The voice claimed to be the king and said we didn't belong in his palace," Sarah explains. "The way it was said, it wasn't a polite request to leave. It was a command from someone who expected absolute obedience." Senior tour guide Isabella Moreno has witnessed the phenomenon multiple times over her 20-year career. "It always happens in Ferdinand's private chambers," she says in Spanish. "The air becomes thick, oppressive, like breathing through cloth. Then comes the breathing, deep, labored, like someone struggling with rage or preparing to give orders. Sometimes visitors faint, others just run without explanation. The voice isn't random. Analysis reveals disturbing patterns. It's strongest during winter months, Ferdinand's season of greatest cruelty, when he typically signed his most oppressive decrees. The phenomenon always occurs in rooms where he made his most tyrannical decisions, as if his spirit is forever trapped in moments of absolute power. Most chilling of all, the voice only speaks in Spanish, suggesting that Ferdinand's ghost refuses to acknowledge that his empire ever ended, or that Spain has moved beyond his iron rule. Ferdinand's ghostly presence extends beyond mere voices and shadows. Those who encounter his spirit report physical manifestations that seem to embody the very curse he placed upon Spain with his divisive reign. Father Antonio Sanchez, the palace chaplain, has attempted to bring peace to the troubled halls on multiple occasions. "I've performed 3 formal blessings in those chambers over the past 5 years," he admits. "Each time, something actively resists. You can feel the anger, the absolute refusal to accept peace or forgiveness. It's as if the spirit believes it has nothing to repent for." The most frequently reported phenomenon is what investigators call the royal touch. Visitors feeling a cold, firm hand placed on their shoulder, as if Ferdinand himself is claiming dominion over all who enter his former domain. The touch is described as possessive, authoritative, and deeply unsettling. Paranormal investigator James Wright documented this during a 2022 investigation. 4 different team members reported the same sensation, an icy grip on their shoulder, accompanied by an overwhelming feeling of being judged and evaluated. It felt like being examined by someone who considered himself your absolute superior. But perhaps most disturbing are the sightings from the palace balconies. Local Madrid residents regularly report seeing a figure in black standing motionless on the upper terraces, watching the city below with what witnesses describe as proprietary malevolence, the gaze of someone who still considers himself the ruler of all he surveys. Carmen Vega, whose apartment faces the palace, has seen the figure dozens of times. "Usually during political upheavals or national crises, I see him there," she explains in Spanish. "Always the same balcony, always perfectly still, just watching over Madrid like he still owns every building, every street, every person." Spanish folklore has embraced these manifestations as proof of Ferdinand's eternal punishment. A king so consumed with absolute power that death itself cannot free him from his obsession with control and dominance. In the digital age, Ferdinand VII's haunting has attracted serious paranormal researchers armed with cutting-edge technology. What they've discovered validates centuries of whispered stories and transforms folklore into documented fact. Dr. Patricia Valdez, a specialist in electronic voice phenomena from Barcelona's Institute of Paranormal Studies, conducted the most comprehensive investigation to date in 2023. Using advanced audio equipment and spectrum analysis, we captured over 20 distinct EVPs in Ferdinand's former chambers, all matching his documented voice pattern from historical recordings, she reports. The scientific evidence is compelling. Electromagnetic field readings consistently spike to impossible levels in 3 specific locations: Ferdinand's throne, his private study, where he signed oppressive laws, and the corridor where he abolished Spain's first constitution. These readings have been verified by multiple independent teams using different equipment. Paranormal researcher David Collins documented EMF readings of over 300 milligauss in the throne room, 50 times higher than normal background levels. No electrical sources in the palace could account for these readings, he confirms. The electromagnetic disturbances seem to center on objects Ferdinand used most frequently during his reign. Spanish paranormal investigator Alejandro Ruiz has spent 3 years conducting monthly investigations, accumulating over 200 hours of documentation. The activity is undeniable and appears to be growing stronger, he reports. Recent investigations show increased EVP activity, more frequent physical manifestations, and stronger electromagnetic disturbances than we recorded in our initial studies. Palace staff, while officially discouraged from discussing paranormal activity, privately maintain detailed logs of unexplained events. Internal documents obtained through Freedom of Information requests reveal over 150 documented incidents since 2015, including door slamming, temperature drops, unexplained voices, and equipment malfunctions in Ferdinand's former chambers. Spanish newspapers regularly feature visitor testimonials, and online paranormal forums consistently rank Madrid's Royal Palace among Europe's most actively haunted royal residences. Tourism websites and review platforms contain hundreds of accounts from visitors who experienced unexplained phenomena during their tours. Yet official palace management maintains diplomatic silence about their supernatural resident, preferring to focus on art, architecture, and legitimate history, rather than acknowledging that Spain's most controversial monarch may still be holding court in the shadows of his former throne room. As morning light creeps across Madrid's skyline, the royal palace appears peaceful and majestic, a monument to Spain's golden age and royal heritage. But for those who know its darkest secret, daylight only masks the presence that awakens when darkness falls across the marble halls. Ferdinand VII was a king who ruled through fear, who crushed freedom beneath his iron will, who divided his nation so completely that the wounds still haven't fully healed 2 centuries later. In life, he was Spain's nightmare, a tyrant who destroyed lives, shattered families, and nearly brought a great nation to its knees. In death, he may be Spain's eternal burden. Perhaps his spirit clings to these ornate chambers because he cannot accept what history has decided about his legacy. That his reign was a catastrophe, his rule a disaster, his memory a cautionary tale about the absolute corruption of absolute power. The king who demanded unquestioning obedience in life cannot comprehend that death has stripped him of all authority. Or perhaps Ferdinand VII's ghost serves a different purpose entirely, a supernatural guardian of Spain's darkest chapter, ensuring that the lessons of tyranny are never forgotten, that the price of surrendering freedom to despotism remains forever fresh in the national memory. Do you believe Spain's cursed king still guards his throne from beyond the grave? Does the ghost of Ferdinand VII continue to haunt the royal palace of Madrid, forever trapped by his own cruelty, ambition, and refusal to relinquish power? The throne room waits in darkness. The corridors echo with phantom footsteps, and somewhere in those royal chambers, a voice still whispers, "Yo soy el rey."